you think about how big China is and how massive it is. I brought a group of students back. We left China. We arrived in Seoul. So Seoul, if you think about Seoul, it's a big city, right? Actually, Seoul is smaller than Edmonton, but there are 14 million people in Seoul. Anyways, so my students got into Seoul and said, "Oh, it seems so relaxing here." Like we were relaxed and calm when we got to a 14 million person city because we had just left Beijing and Shanghai, right? That's that contrast, right, between China and even Korea. Okay, so I'll just introduce myself. My name is Michael Roberts. I'm an associate professor and chair of international business, marketing strategy and law at MacEwan University. And I took some students last year to Korea and China, and we took another group of students to Thailand. And actually, I've spent a good part of my adult life in Seoul before I came back and did my PhD. And I worked at one of the schools that we'll have a partnership with when we go. Now, this is a very new study tour, and this study tour actually evolved while I was in while I was in Korea and Thailand last year. And it's this idea of green growth. So last year I arrived in Seoul about a week before the study tour started, and I was visiting with my friends at the Canadian Embassy. And they were all in a panic because they were running this green growth tour. They had a big mission. Alberta mission had come over for green growth in Seoul, and so all my buddies were all working 24/7 on this. And so when it was done, I sat down and chatted with them. They're like, the Koreans they're going all in on green growth, right? These large Korean companies, that's how they're going to. I mean, of course, Samsung knows that there's no future in its cell phone business, right? Like smartphones that's gone, right? I mean, pretty soon the Chinese are going to be commoditizing the entire market and it'll be done, right? So they're thinking, okay, what's next? They're on the even on kind of second horizon, not even on third horizon, right? They're thinking that they need a whole new stream of business, and they're going in big for green growth. And what was really interesting is you go down to Thailand and you see this kind of they're going in for sustainable development, right? And so if you had all of the money in the world, what would green growth look like? So you go to Seoul and see it, right? These huge, Seoul has the highest per capita of PhDs in engineering anywhere in the world, right? And so it's kind of like if you had all the money in the world, this is how you would do green growth. And you go down to Thailand and you say if you had a very limited kind of budget, a limited economy, what would sustainable development look like? So I'm hoping that this is kind of the thing we're going to do on this tour. And it's going to have to unfold. And so everything I say to you today, we're really at the beginning stages. The only thing is I've put a couple partnerships in place, and they're really, really, really good partners. And so it'll sort of, by Christmas, we'll have, Korea is different. Korea used to be this way. Korea used to be the China way, where everything was just, okay, well, we'll just do it on the spot. Now the Koreans are actually becoming bigger planners, I think, than we are. So by Christmas, we'll have the whole thing done and ready to go. We'll know what companies we're going into, and we'll only be tweaking at the very end. So it'll look something like this, right? We'll leave Edmonton on day one. I've got it down here as day one, but my sense is it's almost exactly the same dates as the other study tours. April 30th, May 1st, 14th, 15th, that kind of, it's the same 2-week period. We'll arrive in, have a nice tour of Seoul, and then we'll have a company visit. So I'm hoping for at least 2, if not 3 company visits in Seoul, and then we'll be spending some academic days with our partner at the KAIST Graduate School of Management. And so one kind of full week there. You know what? I don't like the way I put these orders. I think I'll do Seoul first, and then I'll do Bangkok. Come back for Bangkok. So our partner in Seoul is the KAIST Graduate School of Management. KAIST Graduate School of Management is Korea's top MBA program and oldest, and it's a top 100 FT MBA program. That's where I used to work. So I'm a little biased, but and I have some very, very good friends there, and they do these kinds of programs. They host MBA programs coming in. But just like Eddie Wong said, it's, you know, in Asia, its name is so important. So last year we snuck in the back door. So I was bringing my MacEwan undergraduate students, and I wasn't bringing many of them. So we kind of snuck in the back door, and we got a couple lectures from my friends and stuff like that. But they wouldn't really host us. But when I called up this year, and I said, well, I'm bringing the MBA students from the University of Alberta, they're like, oh, yeah, we can do that, right? So and so it was a big difference. Just a couple of, we're getting a lecture from this professor. Named Professor Sook, but I couldn't find, he's a very close friend of mine, and I couldn't find a picture anywhere of him except for this silly picture here, so that's him. And a very, very dear friend of mine, Professor Joe Dewberry, will give a very interesting lecture on Korea. He arrived in Korea in 1978, and he's been there for most of his life since 78, teaching at business schools, and has just a deep and sort of good insight into, you know, a person who's always sort of been on the edge of society, looking in for most of his life, and gives a really, really good lecture. And then Professor Chung, she's an American, will help organize and run the program when we're at KAIST. So we'll have some time at KAIST. The only company visit that I'm really sort of talking about right now is we'll definitely get a lecture from the company manager at Effendorf, and they're a German a German medical device manufacturer. And we had a very good lecture from them last year. And so they've committed to doing it again. They said, oh, you know, if you're coming back, we'll do it again. They're not green growth, so I don't want to put anybody else or other companies. We took tours of Hyundai last year and Hyundai Steel. And we did those kind of tours. But those kind of tours, the problem with those is they're long, you spend a long time getting to these massive, like they're city-size factories. So by the time you get into them and you take a little tour and then you come back, that's your entire day, and you're like, okay, so we saw boats getting loaded. Like, it blows your mind, sure. Like it's hundreds, thousands of cars being loaded onto boats, right? And you're like, wow, that blows my mind. But then you're wondering, we got back at the end of the day and we all sat around. We said, yeah, that was cool, but God, it was a whole day at it, kind of thing. So we're trying to maybe not do that. One thing I really want us to do when we're in Seoul is, and I'm hoping we can pull this off, is not use buses, but rather use the public transportation, use the subway system. This is the Seoul subway system. Yeah, you can get anywhere in Seoul on the subway. And there's something about living and breathing the city and understanding what a city is through sort of going through the subway. We did this last year in a much smaller group, but that was a real highlight of the tour. When I arrived in Korea in 1995, there were 3 lines. And they add a line every year. So this whole stupid MacEwan-Nate extension of the LT, like just for me, that just drives me crazy. It's like, it's a subway line, guys. You could have built 8 of them by now, right? You could build 8 whole lines by now. There's a beautiful place. Seoul is a beautiful city. And as I said before, one nice thing about Seoul is it's tiny. It's a tiny little city once you're there. And so everything we want to see, for instance, this is all in North Seoul, right? We'll take a day and we'll tour North Seoul. And it's, we can walk from one tour place to the next. You don't need buses and that kind of thing. If you're in, Seoul's divided into 2 parts. One is North Seoul, South Seoul. South Seoul, you know, because of the Gangnam. Gangnam just translates into South Seoul, or south of the river, right? And there's north of the river. So you can be north of the river and south of the river. The old Seoul is north of the river, and new Seoul is south of the river. So we'll do it, you know, and it's a really beautiful city to tour. And one thing is it's not as overwhelming as Beijing, right? Beijing is overwhelming. Wow, that's the biggest thing I've ever seen in my life, right? Wow, that's the other biggest thing I've ever seen in my life. Where Seoul, everything's a bit smaller, but there's something special about it. you go there not to be overwhelmed, but rather to experience it in its sort of uniqueness. The other thing, of course, with Seoul, which is always fascinating, is they're building their history. Seoul was wiped out after the Second World War. It was done. There was no more Seoul, right? All the trees were cut down, most men were dead, right? Like everything, like it was an absolutely destroyed country. It was the poorest place in the entire world, right? And so their history that was there is being reconstructed. And so it's kind of interesting to see, right? It is historical, and it is accurate. I mean, they have archaeologists and everybody working on it. But, you know, it's a kind of redevelopment of their history. Even this river here, which, the river down here, this river is really, I don't want to take too much time with stories right now, but I'll do this once, the river. The river, the Japanese blocked the river when the Japanese invaded in the early 1900s. And they blocked the river because the river flew, the river's path went through the palace. And they figured if they blocked the river, they could kill the spirit of the Korean king. This is a very Japanese thing to do. And so they, so they blocked this river up. And then when the Japanese were forced out, they got the river running again. But they eventually just sort of, you know, they built roads over top of it. It became really dirty, sort of part of Seoul. And some years ago, they pulled it all apart and they rebuilt the river. And it's become sort of a highlight of downtown Seoul now, this beautiful river that runs through it. One thing we'll do is there's a highlight, is a show that we all, every study tour that goes to Seoul goes to this show. It's called Nanta, inside Myeongdong, and we'll take you there. Oh, there it is there, the one in the middle. Okay, yeah, so we have some very good connections with the KAIST Graduate School Management. We're going to build those out. And we have some really good connections with the Canadian Embassy, and particularly, not just the Canadian Embassy, actually the Alberta Mission in Seoul. And they've sort of agreed that they'll help out with this. Actually, our head of mission is a U of A grad. He used to work in the International Center here. So he was quite keen that we come. And so we'll do something quite rich. I feel, I'm not giving enough details on the actual tours that we're doing. And the only reason I'm doing that is because we really want to do this green growth and we want to find the right companies to get into. So that's Seoul. So we'll spend about a week in Seoul. There are other things we might do. We might get on a high-speed train and go down to Busan. It's possible that we'll do that. We did that last year. We might take a DMZ tour, but I was told I wasn't allowed to put that up because apparently there's risk management issues around the DMZ. We never checked at MacEwan last year, we just went. But the DMZ is an interesting tour if you get to take it because it's surreal, right? I mean, it's the most heavily fortified area of the world almost right now, and and you get there and it's lonely and it's weird and stark. It gives you kind of you have to experience it in a sense to understand the tension between the two countries. You know, guys standing with guns ready. Okay, and then the second week will be in Thailand. So my green growth it started in Seoul. You know, I was in Seoul, I was talking to the guys at the embassy, and they were telling me all what was going on with green growth in Korea. Then I get down to Thailand, and we were in northern Thailand, and you know, if you think about Thailand 20, 25 years ago, you had all kinds of bad thoughts come, right? You know, it was just the opium trade was rampant in Thailand, and the sex trade was quite awful in Bangkok. And so if you think about, and so what's happening now in northern Thailand, where essentially both the opium and sort of the extortion of women was taking place, is that there's both private organizations and royal projects involved in the transitioning of these economies into sort of modern economies or sustainable economies and sustainable development. And I got to experience a bit of that last year. And it was fascinating. And that's when I really said, oh, there's a contrast here. It's a real contrast between what's going on in Seoul and what's going on in in Thailand. And so that got, and then since then we found out there's a considerable green push as well, green growth push in Thailand. We're really lucky we'll be able to partner up with the SASN Graduate Institute of Business Administration. SASN is Thailand's top MBA program. It's only an MBA program. It's located inside a university. I always hate saying it. There you go. And so and we're lucky to be partnering with SASN. And I just got confirmation from them that they'd be happy to work with us. I've spent some time at SASN. Some years back, I organized a conference there, and so I barely remembered the person who I worked with, but I dug out her email address and emailed her over, and she says, "Oh, I remember you, Michael." And I'm like, "Okay." And so it's good. I'm glad she did, and they've agreed to work with us. Oh, there's me in Thailand. I don't have a lot more for Thailand. We were in Thailand last year. It's yeah. That's just,
maybe just talk a little bit about the picture on the right, the boats and the flower markets and things on the water.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So this is just north of Bangkok. This is a floating market. They have actually several floating markets in Thailand. Thailand's a very water-based country, so there's a lot of water-based transportation internally in Thailand. So this is a kind of, apparently it's one of the oldest running floating markets in Thailand. And it's very much, there's little touristy spots to it, right? So you get in, little parts of it are very, very touristy. But then if you walk about, it's very much a active market that actual Thai people use. What was so interesting is we got into these places that looked like tourist traps. And the guide said to us, "Oh, you know, you guys are foreigners, so you don't like all of these sort of tourist things. This is much more for Thai people. Thai people just love all this tourist stuff." And I'm like, "Oh, I just kind of thought it was for foreigners." She's like, "Oh, no, they hardly even want to talk to the foreigners. They don't make any money off of them." So it's actually a very active and real market. And I had my noodles on the market there. Oh, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. I included these pictures because this is another thing that inspired me to think about this sustainable development. This is the resident of the king's mother, and in more northern Thailand near Chiang Rai, and she moved there to support the transformation of the northern economy to more sustainable development. So this is her. It's a beautiful residence, but it's actually quite simple for the Queen Mother. And so that was kind of the inspiration to start thinking about this.
Mike, you might want to just mention
Sure.
that Thailand is still one of the few kingdoms
yes.
in the world.
Yeah.
So maybe just touch on that.
Oh, yeah. Actually, Thailand is a kingdom. The king is revered. Very much so. Like, when you're there, don't say anything bad about the king or you'll go to jail. In actuality. Yep.
I was just going to say, from my experience, the king was coming to the palace, and I wanted to take a picture of them, and then all the Thai people started like, no, like you're not supposed to take pictures of the royal family. So it's really interesting to see their relationship with them, and they very much admire them. So
they do, yeah. And actually, the SASN's a really interesting place, interesting name. The SASN Graduate School makes no sense in any language. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't stand for anything either. What it was is I met him. He was a very, very old man. He was the director of the MBA, and he was the founder of the SASN Graduate School of Management. And he was a childhood friend of the king, and that's what he called the king. It was his pet name for him. And so the king and the director, when they were building the MBA program, they built this. It was funded by the king originally. The buildings and all the MBA program was funded by the king originally, and they decided to call it SASN. And for some years, they didn't tell anybody why. Yep.
I just have a question on
Sure.
how many Saturday classes this would take. Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, we were just talking, because I don't actually.
Okay.
So we were just talking about it, and it's got to be, apparently it was very short last year. I think we'll need some Saturdays to get ready for this. I'm open for it, so I'll have to discuss. But it should be, it should be some, right? There's quite a bit of work that'll need to be done in the new year to do this. Maybe, I mean, if we had 3 Saturdays, I think that would be good.
Another question is, is there like a research paper or is it a group presentation? Do you have a sense of what we're going to be marked on?
Yeah, if we run it the same way as I ran the undergraduate one at MacEwan, we did a group research paper with a presentation. I would lean more towards individual research papers, but once again, actually, I'm going to talk with the folks. I'm just moving. I'm quite open to what we'll do academically to get prepared. The idea is to go there prepared. The more prepared you go there, both culturally and for the companies that we're going to visit, just the more value you can extract while you're there. So I want to do some work with you to get you prepared. Yep.
Is there a max number for this trip or
30.
And
Yeah.
the MBA undergraduates?
No
undergrad.
Oh, okay.
The only one combined undergrad is the Europe
Mm-hmm.
registration.
Probably within the next 2 weeks, once we get information out, find out all the fast track where they're going. But we will send an email to all of us with the details of when it's going. I had personally.
Yep.
Do we know what cities besides Bangkok that you're planning to go to?
Yeah, I want to go north but we still haven't planned that out. We want to go up. Ideally, we'd go all the way up into Chiang Mai and see what that would be the ideal. But I can't commit to that until we get it better organized. The beauty of Chiang Mai is that's where some of the sustainable development is going. It's also that's cool too because you. I'll say it. You get out of the touristy areas. Bangkok has become very, very, very. It's become the spot for Chinese tourists to go to. And when Chinese decide, oh, let's go on a tour, then all 1 million of them come every week, right? And it's changed Bangkok. This year, I was just a bit overwhelmed with Bangkok because I've been going to Bangkok since 1999, right? And I was a bit overwhelmed with how busy it was. And then we went up into Chiang Mai, and I'm like, okay, this is a bit richer. So I'm hoping we'll do things like that. But give me,
One of the things we're working on with going up to Chiang Mai, unlike China or Japan, there's no high-speed trains.
Right.
It's an 8-hour train ride, and so we're not going to do an 8-hour train ride.
Right.
So we're looking at costs of flights and hotels
That's right.
and things like that.
Yeah.
So we're trying to keep your costs down as well as our costs down. So we're factoring all of those in, trying to decide how we can still do it and yet give you the best value and not make the price too outrageous.
Right.
So that's what we're working on.
Yeah. So that'll be the tension. I got a great plan. and so the idea is how do we make that happen for an affordable rate?
Any other questions?
So when will the registration time open before after we have all the information about the cost of the trip?
Well, I'll give you a worst case scenario, so you won't pay higher than what I just
So we just have the number of the worst case.
Yeah.
Worst case. Okay.
And so yeah, I guess you have to keep in mind, be prepared to pay worst case. Well, for sure, if it's your own first trip, deduct $750 from that. It's pretty much guaranteed. And some maybe $300 to $500 for MBA, for sure you're guaranteed. So from there, we don't know.
Okay.
The only the cost sell I can give you is that your out-of-pocket money in Seoul in Thailand will probably be less than Europe.
And
Right.
less than Japan.
And way less than Japan. Oh, Japan's the most expensive place in the world. With that in Germany, right? I mean, not Germany, I guess, it's more Austria. But Thailand and Korea at night, Seoul and Thailand are quite reasonable places for your entertainment parts, right? Yep.
Because there's no Japan this year, I was wondering from your experience living in Korea for a long time, would you say Korea is, the culture is closer to Japan or to China? Because that country is squeezed in between two giants. And
Right.
heavily influenced the country over the Asian and modern period. So which one would you say Korea is more similar to?
Okay, there's no Koreans here, right? Okay, so the Korean culture is closer to Japanese, I would say. And the Koreans would never like you to hear that, but I would say so. Yeah, there was so much Japanese influence in Korea, and even though the Koreans, resent it, there is certainly the business culture, very much a Japanese structured business culture. The difference between the main business culture difference between the Japanese and the Koreans is that the Koreans were very, very heavily influenced by the Americans. In terms of business, where the Japanese haven't. The Japanese had their management schools all set up and all running, and have a whole management culture that even after the war just continued on, whereas the Korean management schools and management thought and the way they run their companies was heavily influenced by American business interests, because that's where most of the investment came from after the war, right? It was the United States.
Well, some of you probably have class at 6:00. So thank you very much.